sport for women were viewed as very masculine and something that you wouldn't really and shouldn't really go into, and it'll never be a career and you're not going to make much from it, and people don't take you very seriously. And my experience in London was very, very different in that women's sport was taken more seriously. It was still seen as very masculine. It didn't have as many opportunities and not nearly as many resources as you would see in the US. I think that is starting to change now. But the big difference that I noticed, the difference in the emphasis with the technical, tactical, physical, and mental parts of the games.
Welcome to Limitless Minds, the podcast where curiosity meets greatness. Each week, co-host DJ Eitzen and Harry Wilson sit down with some of the most exceptional individuals across sports, business, and beyond. From world-class athletes and peak performance coaches to visionary CEOs, entrepreneurs, and influential authors, they dive deep into the stories and strategies that drive extraordinary success. If you're ready to discover what it takes to be truly limitless and push beyond your own limits, you're in the right place.
Welcome back to the Limitless Minds podcast. Today we have Elle Nelson, who's a mental performance coach with the Columbus Crew of Major League Soccer and one of the world-class mindset coaches for Limitless Minds. She's originally from Missoula, Montana. She played collegiate soccer as a defender at Warner Pacific University from 2012 to 2015. After college, Elle went on to play professional soccer in Europe and competed in the Women's Premier League in the United States. In 2019, she earned her Master of Science in Sports and Exercise Psychology, and she's passionate about helping athletes and high performers strengthen their mental game. And her coaching philosophy is grounded in the belief that a successful person never loses. They either win or they learn. Enjoy. All right. We're excited today. We have Elle Nelson, who's a great friend of ours. We've known her for a couple of years now. She is one of our fantastic Limitless Minds room tilters, one of our coaches, one of our, really world-class mindset and peak performance coaches. She's got a really rich history as a performer in athletics, rich history coaching those that perform. We're going to get into a little bit of that and whatnot, but she's also pretty well traveled. She spent some time in Europe, both as a player. I think she's lived over there. She's spent some time recently. So, it's kind of been a little bit since we've had some updates from Elle. So we're just excited to kind of, reconnect and also really more importantly, share Elle with our audience and everything. So Elle, good to see you. How are you?
Oh, thanks, Harry. I'm really good. Thank you. I'm so happy to be here. I can't tell you how excited I am to dive in.
Awesome. Yeah.
So good to see you.
Yeah. So you're in DJ's neck of the woods, as you mentioned before we got started. You're in Columbus.
Mm-hmm.
So you're about 2 hours away from DJ, and he doesn't take you out to dinner. He doesn't come and treat you a certain,
that is kind of wrong, man.
You gotta get this.
I gotta head down there, man. No doubt. What's that?
DJ's in Cleveland. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm sorry, I missed that. Yeah, I'm in Cleveland. Yeah. So about 2 hours north of you.
I'm gonna be in Cleveland on Friday, so I'm gonna be reaching out.
Yeah, you should. I think that so I'm making fun of DJ like he's super close. I'm not that far either. I'm about 3.5 hours away from you, but you didn't, you're not from Columbus. You're there now. We'll talk a little bit about what you're doing with the Columbus Crew, but you're from Missoula, Montana, right? Yeah, and so I thought this would be a kind of just to get the audience to get to know you a little bit. Like, tell us a little bit about that history and like kind of where you're from. You're from Missoula.
Mm-hmm.
You were a top-notch soccer player, through college and beyond. Just give us a little bit of the background on where you're from and the family and how you got into soccer.
Yeah. I, like you mentioned, I guess I kind of consider myself well-traveled. I think there's a whole part of the world I've not seen, but growing up in Missoula, Montana, I never would have thought that of myself. I mean, we have more cows than people to give you perspective. Same area code for the whole state. And I was very fortunate to, I think, have the parents that I did, to be completely honest. I wouldn't have considered myself a standout athlete. And I think growing up in Montana, you don't often have the same opportunities as you would growing up in bigger cities and bigger states. And so I never really imagined big dreams and big goals for myself, but I fortunately had a dad who played hockey very competitively and who had a lot of belief in me and really challenged me to believe beyond what I could see in my immediate future, and pushed me to be uncomfortable pretty consistently. So I think that was a big part of my upbringing. I can distinctly remember there was a period of my childhood where I think I was rebelling a lot and I was getting into quite a bit of trouble. And my dad made me, as a punishment, my dad made me try out for a musical. And I was I was not that type.
What?
But he just put me in those experiences where I was like, what on earth?
Yeah.
And it was just to challenge me in ways that I probably wouldn't have been otherwise. Yeah, so that was a big part of my upbringing, I would say. But there were some bumps along the road for sure.
So Montana is one of those states, like, you list out the states you haven't been to. I think I have five. I think I have 5 left. Montana is one of those, and that's like a place that everybody talks fondly of. I've never been. It's on the list, and I'm trying to
Me
get there in the
neither.
next 3 to 5 years. So,
Oh my
so yeah,
God.
you have to give us a
Yeah.
little education on Montana as we finally make a trip out. I want to take the kids out, and
Yeah.
That's right.
Guys, I'm honestly surprised by that with how popular Yellowstone is now.
yeah, I know.
Mhm.
Yellowstone
Yeah.
National
Yeah.
Park, but
Just-
I would say Glacier National Park, I rate more than I do Yellowstone. And
I've heard great things about Glacier. Yeah,
it's the kind of place, Montana in general, and I think Missoula especially, I grew up, it's like a valley. And I did not realize how beautiful it was until I left and I had something to compare it to. And I was like, wow, you all didn't grow up in the outdoors?
Yeah.
You didn't grow up hiking, fishing, biking, all the things, horseback riding.
Jump roping.
Jump roping.
Ellie jumps.
Later. That wasn't until later. Yeah, but I didn't appreciate that stuff, and I didn't realize how beautiful Montana is until I left. So I would highly recommend it if you like the outdoors. If you don't, you probably don't want to go there.
yeah,
That's cool.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
really
Yeah.
cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you've traveled a lot then since Montana. Tell us a little bit about that and what's taking you around the globe.
Do you know what? I'll kind of take it back to high school. So like I mentioned, there were a period of my teens where I was rebelling, which I think can be quite common. But when I say rebelling, like I was getting into, I'm sure my parents would love to hear this right now, but I was like getting into drugs. I ended up getting into a car accident where I was like 15 and I was drinking and driving. And I quit soccer for a year. And in that car accident specifically, I should have died because it was actually don't really ever talk about this, but we went off down the side of a mountain and hit a tree, and it was only tree in about 200 yards. And so if we didn't hit that tree, we would have just rolled. And the police came, and I was expecting to be in a lot of trouble. And granted, like I was in trouble, but they were like, look, we're not going to give you a ticket. We're not going to write you up for anything. You need to count this as a blessing, because if that didn't happen to you, you wouldn't be here right now. So I hope things change for you. And after that moment, everything changed. I went back to playing soccer, and I started doing it for myself. And I attribute my soccer career to that moment. My life choices that I made, where I decided to go to college, and the specific college I chose was because I turned my life around at that point. From then, there was something inside of me that had a deeper meaning and decided to be really brave and really ruthless with who I wanted to be and what I wanted in my life. And I think that drove moving away for college, that drove moving overseas and trying to have a playing career. So much of my decisions beyond that point were because of that one moment.
Wow. That's really powerful.
Yeah.
How did your parents respond in that moment? And were they a catalyst to kind of help along this journey that you?
Yeah, I think that they were. Of course, there was a part of them that was disappointed, but I think more than anything, they gave me a lot of grace because they saw how I was within myself in that moment. And they were also very grateful that I was still alive.
Yeah.
And I think they saw the change that happened in me when I went through that, in terms of the decisions I started making, the people that I stopped hanging out with, the people that I started hanging around. They saw that, and I think they realized that situation was punishment enough. Don't get me wrong, I was grounded. I didn't have a phone for quite a while.
Right.
But I think they saw that in me, and they chose to take more of the route of grace and support long term, which really helped.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
Really
Well,
cool.
and so you ended up going to Warner Pacific and playing
Mhm.
soccer, right?
Yeah.
Why did you choose WP?
I
And yeah, and I'm also curious, like, what kind of player were
West
you?
Side.
You know what I
West
mean?
Side.
Like what kind,
I was
like
gonna
what,
try and do that. Yeah.
yeah, just for those that can't see us, like
Mhm.
they just gave
Just throwing up the West Side, man. That's
What's
just what we do.
yeah, just letting you know what the laughter was there. But yeah, I mean, why Warner, why WP, and I'm curious to learn what kind of player you were. Like, how would you describe the type of player
Mhm.
you were
So why Warner Pacific? I chose Warner because um, I I knew one I needed to get out of Missoula because at that time it wasn't a good influence on me and the person that I wanted to be. That was a big reason. Two, it was a like a religious university, and for me, faith was something that I really leaned into. It was something that helped keep me grounded. And there was a small student to faculty ratio. And again, I knew I didn't necessarily wanted that. I would have loved to just slip under the radar and be another number at a big school, but I knew that was going to help me be the person that I wanted to be, the student that I wanted to be, and the player that I wanted to be. So that was a really big reason why I chose that school specifically, not even just for the soccer. Uh, for the soccer, I really connected with the coach at the time. I felt like I was sort of seen for what my strengths were, which um, for a player, I think means a lot, and even in any type of leadership and followership type of role, when you feel seen for who you are and your authentic self, that goes a really long way and you feel valued for that. And that's
there?
how I felt going into that program. So those were big selling points. But for me as a player going in, I'm a completely different type of, I shouldn't say player now because I'm not really playing competitively anymore, but I lacked so much confidence. I was constantly comparing myself to others. I wouldn't say I was in a great place from a sports psychology perspective, which I didn't even know was a thing at the time.
Yeah.
Um, and so I went in thinking, do I really deserve this? Should I even have a scholarship? Do they actually want me here? I had so many doubts going in. And as a freshman, the one thing I knew about myself, and I think you guys probably know this about me too through getting to know me over the years, is I work. Can I cuss on here? Or
Yeah,
shouldn't
yeah, dude.
I work my ass off. I work my ass off, and I'm very proud of that. But I do it with purpose. I don't just do it for the sake of doing it. And that is something that I brought in as a freshman. Like I might doubt my talents, but my work ethic and my attitude and my coachability, I will bring 100% every single day. And so that's what I did. And my freshman year, I actually got named captain because one of our captains had an ACL injury. And so the coaches named me captain because of
Wow.
those traits, which actually made me doubt myself even more. And so my freshman year, I had these like conflicting emotions and struggles. And it was probably similar emotions to what a lot of freshmen face, but
Mhm.
the growth I had through the 4 years I was in college was tremendous. So that was kind of my starting point into college.
Yeah. What position did you play?
I moved from like an outside mid to
Mhm.
an outside back, and then I finished as a center back. So
Okay.
center back is kind of like my true position now, but I also moved to
Got it.
center mid. I've been
Yeah.
everywhere.
Yeah.
Anywhere but
Got
striker.
it. Got it.
So you mentioned a word that's fascinating to me, confidence.
Yeah.
And to be able to go from high school to college and play a college sport, there has to be a certain amount of confidence to get to that level.
Yeah.
Um, how did you feel like you lost that confidence, and then how did you gain it back? Like what made you go from not having confidence at all then to being able to build it up and regain it?
Um, Not having confidence at all. I think that came from what you normally see like developmentally
Mhm.
through as you're going through your teenage years when you are so focused on yourself and you're not really thinking about other people and comparing yourself to other people. But once you start to get into your teens, you become more aware of other people's talents, other people's strengths. You start comparing yourself more from a social perspective. So developmentally, that's normal, that's expected. But then from a soccer perspective, I was usually the youngest one in my age group. I was always the youngest one in my class in school as well. I started school early. And so I never took into account developmental differences, which at a young age, 6 months, 12 months can be huge. I just saw differences in talent, and that really, I allowed that to hinder my confidence because I was thinking about what other people were and what I wasn't. And when I think that was pretty consistent all through high school, especially because I quit for a year. So that was another year that I wasn't developing.
Okay.
But mentally, that became my competitive edge, and I didn't know it. And then once I got into college, my freshman year, severely lacked confidence still. But then going into my sophomore year, I took a sports psychology class, realized that's exactly what I wanted to do in my life, and that was the piece that I was missing. And I started tapping more into that, and my confidence completely shifted.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. That's really cool.
Here.
Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah.
That's dope. I mean, and then like I know you took your shot at playing professionally.
Mhm.
You went over to, I know you went over to Europe and played in the Women's Premier League. What was it like playing overseas? Like, and what was that decision making journey
Yeah.
like to say, okay, this is what I'm going to try to go do.
Yeah.
And then, obviously you're getting into, not only you get over there and I don't know exactly where you were at over there, but like, what did that, kind of the European culture and playing professionally, like tell us a little about that landscape.
I never expected to go overseas, to be honest. So I had an injury and I got surgery towards the end of my college career. And I kind of thought, oh, once I'm done, I'm done. I played in what's called the WPSL, which is kind of like the women's second division in the US.
Mhm.
And I was doing really well in that. And I had coaches who believed in me. So I do that in the off season. And after I graduated, I did that for a season. And the owner of that team actually bought a team in France. And this is when I was living in Portland still, but he bought a team in France, and he was like, hey, I want to fly you over to France. I want you to be on this team and help us get promoted. How do you feel about it? And I was like, let's go. Yeah, why not? What a great experience, especially when you want to get into sports psychology. Any chance that you can expose yourself to something uncomfortable, a different culture, different way of living, thinking, everything. I was like, great, let's go. And that was a huge shock for me in terms of women's sport and where women's sport was at in another country. That was a huge shock for me in terms of the expectations of like soccer in general or football and what that looks like in other countries. So France was it was difficult at periods, but it was, again, a fantastic experience because it really woke me up. I ended up leaving that club because there were things that weren't really followed through on contractually, and resources were very difficult. And so it was a challenging situation, but a great experience nonetheless.
Mm-hmm.
Women's opportunity and how women were viewed and competing in sport was very different in France. I thought it was going to be more evolved simply because soccer is more evolved in other countries, but actually female sport was not.
Oh,
we got so many opportunities in the US, and overseas at the time, sport for women were viewed as very masculine and something that you wouldn't really and shouldn't really go into, and it'll never be a career, and you're not going to make much from it, and people don't take you very seriously. That was kind of the perception when I went to France, and I was like, whoa.
Right.
Yeah, so that was an amazing experience, but I kind of knew that it wasn't the best fit for me, so I stuck it out for a while, and then I went and did trials over in London. And when I did that, I ended up signing for a team called Charlton Athletic. And my experience in London was very, very different in that women's sport was taken more seriously. It was still seen as very masculine. It didn't have as many opportunities and not nearly as many resources as you would see in the US. I think that is starting to change now. We've seen a lot of change the last few years. But the big difference that I noticed was the the difference in the emphasis with the technical, tactical, physical, and mental parts of the game. So Americans at the time were very much known for athleticism, grit, fight, camaraderie, passion. And then in England, it was like the technical, the systems, the style of play. There was a lot less emphasis on athleticism, being fast, strong, fit. And there wasn't as much camaraderie. And so Americans, like Ted Lasso is very much the stereotype that Americans had prior to Ted Lasso. It was like, why are you so hyped about everything?
Yeah.
Why are you so like rah, go team, go?
Let's go.
Yeah. It was a bit like, okay, you're really positive and that's great, but kind of chill out.
Right.
But actually, people ended up really appreciating that. I was the only American, and there was another Canadian on the team, and we were kind of like the positive, energy-driving, really fit ones that drove the standard. But both of us were lacking technically, so we got a lot better with the ball at our feet.
Nice, really cool. Yeah. So, remind me when you your time at IMG. When did you start with them? What year was that?
That was during COVID. Was it 2019?
2020. Okay.
Yeah.
That's cool. Tell us about your time with that at IMG.
Yeah, it was honestly incredible. I had most of the work that I did with them was remote.
Okay.
I had an offer that was in person, but I chose to be home with my family during COVID because I was worried about traveling and having parents that were alone. But IMG is like the mecca of sport academies, isn't it? And they're different departments. I mean, they don't just look at technical, tactical when it comes to sport. They are thinking about the physical, strength and conditioning. They're thinking about nutrition. They're investing hugely and have been for a long time in mental performance.
Yeah.
So I would say they're more evolved than most clubs, including professional clubs, because of how seriously they've taken that integration for such a long time.
Yeah.
And how much it's integrated into their system day to day. So being a part of something like that, I think is very unique, especially in the sports psychology world.
Yep.
Yeah.
Is there any big takeaways that you had from your time there that you utilize today?
You know what? One of my biggest takeaways is the importance of community. No matter which industry you're working in, I think sports psychology can sometimes feel like a lonely path because you're usually the only one operating in a club or on a team.
Right.
But everybody there was so open to collaboration. How can we openly speak and share our experiences and share our expertise to check and challenge each other, to make each other better, to educate each other? And that was across all departments. That isn't necessarily just with sports psychology, but I think that collaboration and how that can work together. There are so many industries and areas where you don't see that take place, and it stunts growth and evolution when actually we can be making each other better every single day. So if you can, why would you not?
Right.
They do that really well.
Yeah.
Yeah. Have you spent any time coaching the game too? Like, as like on a staff, like coaching the game, or is most of your coaching been, or all of your coaching been on the mental performance side?
I've done a little bit during college. I did some of my coaching licenses, and then after college, I continued coaching like youth and academy teams. So I've done some applied, like actual technical coaching, but most of it has been mental performance.
Yeah. So should I assume that you prefer the mental side of it?
I think that's where my skill set would probably lie. But I would say like something that Columbus Crew have found really valuable with me is my experience, not just as a player, but I do have some coaching experience and coaching qualifications. And sometimes the biggest disconnect is bringing somebody like myself into a club, but they don't get the sport. They don't get the lingo. They don't understand what the coach is asking for and how they like to work. And so the fact that I get that environment and I've lived and breathed that environment was huge for them.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I got to think, because I got to think this relatively unique in your space. You know what I mean? That, most, sports psychologists and folks that are like leading kind of the mental performance side of the game for said sport, may have never played that sport, particularly at a high level, let alone, that maybe that sport at all. And so I think that that's a tremendous value add. It's kind of like, DJ and I, a lot of our clients are like pharma companies. Like the cool thing is we've carried the bag, right? Like we've done the work. And so when we're coming in to solve for the challenges that we're solving for, we can do it with that relatable, with that relatable experience. I mean, I think that's tremendously valuable. I mean, you mentioned that, like, when you were at WP and you kind of finally got access to like some of the mental skills component of it, that's when you decide, okay, this is what I want to do, right? And you ended up getting that master's in sports and exercise psychology. What did you like? The vision for where you're headed do you feel like you're on track with that vision? Do you feel like this is like, okay, I've implemented this, I've done the work, I've gotten my master's, I've worked at IMG, I'm now the Columbus Crew. Is this the track that you've envisioned relative to that?
That's so funny that you asked that. I think I used to think a lot more about that track and how do I make sure I'm doing the right things and the next things, because people working in sports psychology, like IMG is usually on the list of the places that you want to work because it's got such a reputation that it can help you with your next career. And for me, I've made a lot of decisions early on thinking, okay, what's going to be best? How do I build my resume? I started getting internships when I was in college. And I think a few years ago, and Limitless Minds has actually helped me so much with this, with getting really, really clear on my values and on my why and how important that is with the 24 hours I have in a day, how important that is with the decisions that I'm making in my life. And to be honest, the last few years, I've not had a specific big goal in my career that I've been working towards to accomplish. I think in this career path, you're kind of blazing your own trail. So you create things, which is amazing.
It's cool.
But every decision that I've made, I've tried to really be grounded in my values and make sure that I'm aligned with that.
Wow.
When I chose to come to Columbus, it wasn't because it was, oh, this is an MLS club and it's going to be so good for my resume and it's going to help me get all these other opportunities or anything like that. I sat down and met with people at the club, and I wanted to get to know them as people, what their priorities were, what their values were, what their vision was for the club, the type of players that they wanted to bring in, the way they viewed sports psychology. Was it reactive? Was it proactive? Was I coming in to solve a problem? Or did they think it was crucial for performance? I asked all those questions, and I felt that it was very aligned with who I am and who I want to be. And since coming here, every single day I felt confident that it was the right decision, and it had nothing to do with success or the next step in my career. It was because of values.
That's so great. I'm imagining the decision maker, that's going to ultimately hire you. Who was that, by the way? Who pulled the trigger in hiring you?
It was between the general manager, the technical director, and the head coach.
Okay. So they're sitting there, and you have this curious, talented young lady that's in there. Not only obviously you displayed and talked about some of the things that you've done, but you came with questions that, talked, and they could clearly see that there was, alignment and purpose. And by your questioning, I think that would stand out to anybody that would be, going through an interview or going through the interview process. So that's really cool. I really appreciate you sharing that. Didn't you have family in Columbus too? I remember like one of our first conversations.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. That was a big one for me. And it was kind of crazy the way that it worked out. I had, unfortunately, I had an aunt that had passed away. And so I was flying to Columbus for the funeral. Okay. And a few days before I was flying to Columbus, I got an email from the crew, and they were like, hey, we'd love to interview you. You seem like you're going to be a great fit for the role. So we'd love to have a conversation. And I was like, I happen to be in Columbus. Like, I don't know how, but I'm going to be in Columbus in a few days. So is it okay if we meet up? And I came had lunch with a couple people from the club, and it all kind of fell into place. I think it was really meant to be. So I've kind of leaned into trusting that.
That's really cool. Hey, Harry, that sounds a lot like our first kind of some of the early business development calls that we would go on. We would say, hey, you know what? I think we're going to be in Philadelphia next week.
Yeah.
We would show up
We're
at
like,
their
"Yeah,
doorstep.
let's eat and then my book flights, right?
That's exactly right.
So that was funny. So I'm literally on my phone right now, like looking at the schedule for the Columbus Crew.
Okay.
So I just realized that like the season, if I'm looking at this right, the season's just beginning.
Yeah, we're in the first part of the season. Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, because like I swear I'm sitting here like on Ticket Center or whatever. I'm looking ticketcenter.com.
How much is
So
a
it's
ticket,
got, like,
man? What's the ticket? What's the ticket cost?
that's a good
Yeah,
question. Let's find out. Looks like on Saturday, April 19th, y'all have a game against Miami.
Mhm.
Let's see. I'm gonna look at 2 tickets, DJ.
Okay, let's see what's going
Here.
on, man. We try to
You
get down to the CO.
You got that's gonna be
if you want to mess around on the mezzanine levels, mezzanine
Okay.
348, it's about $109 each.
Ooh, dang,
Yeah, they go up. They go up from there. It's popular.
man, they must be good.
it's gonna be a big game against Miami because that's you got Messi, you got Suarez, you got all the
Wow.
guys. So we're playing in the Cleveland Brown Stadium this weekend.
I'm about to say because I see this in that there's like dog pound seats, and I was like, wait a second. So, yeah, I was gonna ask. So yeah, DJ, like you might have to scoop over, take
I
the
might
kids.
have to, man. Good Friday. We might have to get down there.
Scoot on over.
Let me
Get
know
you
if
some
you
tickets,
do.
dude.
I will. I
Yeah,
definitely will.
that would be amazing. Going to soccer, soccer game is like really fun to attend.
Okay.
Especially
Yeah,
at that
I've
level.
never been. I've never been at that level. No,
Yeah.
most of mine is like watching 6 and 7-year-olds kick the ball around. That's been my extent.
Yeah, exactly.
That's right.
Exactly. That's fantastic. So I mean, so relative to the team, I mean, the Crew is, it's a top notch, organization.
Absolutely.
And you also mentioned you also work with the academy, right? Is that correct?
Yeah, so I'm supporting the club as a whole, the first
Yeah.
team all the way through our young academy.
Okay. Yeah. And so like, it's that's critical because so DJ, they have a pipeline, you know what I mean? So how young would be the youngest player in the academy?
I mean, we've got like 12, 13-year-olds, but then we've got, I think from 15, 16, we've got some players in full time.
Okay. I think there's a guy at my church he used to play for the Browns, Reggie Hodges. I think his son or daughter was playing in that pipeline because So anyways, at the goalie, I think. Yeah.
So I mean, you're around, obviously daily, you're around some of the top talent in the world, top talent in the United States, etc. What is it like? What are you learning, from working with, some of the best and brightest players day to day?
I mean, every club operates so differently, and I think I've been around a lot of different head coaches, and the head coach will kind of dictate the environment and what you see from the players when we're thinking about the first team, so the top level, and which would be the MLS here. And I think we've been very fortunate as a club to have. He got Coach of the Year last year. Our head coach did, and he's known as one of the best, if not the best coach that's been in the MLS. I mean, he's unbelievable. So I'm around him daily, and I get to learn from him and see how he leads his staff, his team. And that experience alone, never mind throughout the whole academy and working with the staff and players, I mean, it's like leaps and bounds of learning since I've been here.
So cool.
And his approach, I have to give him a lot of credit because I think it works very, very well for today's player. Like you've seen kind of old school, we call them old school now, leaders who are a little bit more dictatorship, what I say goes, and that worked really well for older generations. But today's generation, you can't get the best out of them by taking that approach. That's right. He has a really good balance of structure, but also a lot of autonomy. He gives a lot of autonomy to the players. There's a lot of mutual respect. And when he's bringing players in, he's looking at the person first and the player second. And his approach is very unique to what I've seen from a lot of coaches. And I think it's made an incredible environment, better than one I've probably ever seen.
That's really cool. Really cool.
Yeah.
So you feel at home there in Columbus.
I do. Yeah. And I've been very blessed coming into this club because they take sports psychology very seriously. When I got here, people were hungry for it. They were like, we're not bringing you in because we've got issues. We're bringing you in because we know this is crucial for performance.
Right.
We want to be a club that evolves, and we're hungry to learn. So since I've been here, people are like, can we have your time? Can you come and talk to us? Can you come and work with us? And normally you'll have a little bit of resistance because people are unfamiliar with it. They don't know what you're going to do. They don't want you stepping on their toes or think you might be contradicting with their coaching styles, and they're worried about confidentiality. So this club, from the head coach all the way down, everybody has been amazing. And that when you got people who are that open to it, you can see transformation happen really quick.
Yeah.
How much of the work you're doing is like one-to-one versus like kind of one to many or one to small group? Is there a delineation between how often you're doing that type of work?
Yeah. So my approach coming into the club has been, I've had to acknowledge that there's only one of me, and it's a big club and there's a lot of teams and a lot of athletes. So as much as I would like to work with everybody one-to-one, that's just not possible. And so the approach that I've taken is I work with the staff on the first team. I'm with them consistently, and I'm available to players one-to-one. I'm out every single day for practices, observing, and then I'm having a lot of informal conversations, which are usually the best types of conversations to be having with them, like informal sessions. And then in terms of supporting the academy, I'll support them one-to-one on a need-to basis. If there's something that's gone horrifically wrong or we need a referral, then I might meet with a player. But right now it's mainly working through the staff, through educating the staff, helping them understand how to apply sports psychology onto the pitch or onto the field. Because at the end of the day, they're the ones that have the most contact with the boys. So if they're not on board and they don't practice it themselves, it's not going to be reinforced and it's not going to stick with the players. So I'm starting with the staff, and then eventually we'll get to the players.
So how would you compare, like, you've done work in sports, you've done work in business. How would you compare those things? Like what things are similar when you're working with an athlete versus a corporate athlete?
Yeah, good question. I think there's a lot of similarities, but sport is a very raw way to see things because the emotion is raw, it's real, it's very present, it's more acceptable in that environment, and it moves so fast. Sport does that you get to see the impact of what you're doing, and I think that helps. For me, it helps me see what works, what doesn't work, how different people respond to different things to then take into the corporate environment. But in terms of an athlete's approach to mental performance, I think it's very, very similar to a performance-driven environment in the boardroom, in the corporate space completely. And what I mean, like some examples of that would be your approach to the process and your approach to a performance and what that looks like. Being able to perform under pressure. So I try and simplify it as much as possible. It's being self-aware and having a good reflection process to be able to go, what's working really well and how do I continue to replicate that? And what's not working and how do I reduce that? And it's this constant feedback system that you're in. And then how do I ensure that I'm doing everything in my power to have that process during the week? So that way, when I need to perform in your own respect in your own career path, you can show up on the day and trust that you've done the work and feel good about that, feel at peace with that because you've had a good process.
It's good. It's really good. I'm sorry, Harry, just a follow-up. Are there things that you do personally to keep mentally sharp and, to stay on your game?
Yeah, sleep is one of them.
Hey, I love it. Hey, listen, speak, preach. Okay. Naps important to you?
It is overlooked, honestly. Like, we think that we're machines and we can just go. Right. We can. I mean, top athletes prioritize sleep. They prioritize naps because they know it's important to perform your best. So, even for me, if it's taking 5 minutes and just breathing and shutting my eyes and switching off, or going for a quick walk and getting fresh air before I return to a task.
Yep.
That's huge. That's
Yeah.
huge. For me, another one is being able to separate the emotion from the situation. I think this is really around being neutral and getting to neutral. I use that all of the time because I'm very often, having people around me who might have heightened emotions. Information's delivered to you very fast. In this environment, people can be very direct and they'll call you out, and it can seem conflicting, but it's really just delivery of information. And you have to be the one to remove the emotion, receive the information, and figure out how you're going to move forward. And that is being neutral. And I have to practice that consistently. So that's probably probably the biggest tools.
No, that's helpful. Very helpful.
Yeah. How do you see, like, your coaching adapt based on, working with some of the guys that are in that, let's call it 12 to 16-year-old range in the academy versus guys that are well seasoned, elite players at the MLS level? Like, do you see a different, are you kind of approaching those two audiences differently and adapting accordingly, or is it largely the same?
It's probably not as different. For my approach personally, it's probably not as different as somebody would expect. The differences are what I'm considering going into the conversation. And I'm trying to consider like psychological and developmental differences. I'm trying to consider differences in environment, expectation, pressure, different circumstances. Some of these boys are away from home. They've got homestay sort of families that they're living with. They're not going to a normal school. So, and then you got first team players who are trying to support a wife and kids. They're towards the end of the career. They've got 1 year left on their contract. They're not making as much money as an NFL player in terms of setting themselves up for financial stability. So I take those things into consideration. That's the difference. But the similarities would be seeing the person first and the player second. If somebody doesn't feel valued or seen and you don't hold space for them and you go right into solution mode, they're not going to want to have another conversation with you. So you have to hold space first and foremost. And then second is when I am trying to help and provide a tool of some kind, simple and less is always better.
Yeah.
Sometimes we overcomplicate things and we think we need to talk around and just talk at, but more questions, less talking, keeping it really, really simple seems for me, that's the best approach in terms of actually doing what's best for the person and making a difference. Yeah.
Makes sense.
Were you saying something?
Yeah, sorry, it went on mute. I was saying that it aligns with what Trevor taught. Do simple better. When you're saying that, and it's so true. There's a lot of times you'll have the answer, and then you kind of talk around it, and you give an example. It's just like, no, what do I need? Like, what do I need to do? And so I appreciate you bringing that up.
Yeah, I'm thinking about, like, DJ and I, we have kids, and DJ's got one that's close to going to college. My oldest is 12 and a half, almost 13. I can speak for Gracie, like, she's playing like really competitive, like highly competitive field hockey right now. Right. She's in a club, program. They're one of the top club programs in the nation. I think they're ranked like number 5 or 6 in the country. And but now it's getting real because she's a youth. She plays U14, and so some of these girls are about to start high school, and obviously with recruiting it kind of begins, right? And then but then also, like, you play with your friends for from your 8 to 12 or 6 to 12 or whatever. You play on any team. You play with your friends. Even at that age, you kind of, that's really what half the reason why you're out there is, hey, you're playing with my girls that I go to middle school with as well. We do sleepovers. Like, this is great, right? But now it's getting to the point where, as these girls are getting evaluated, they're not all riding together on the same teams. There might be an A team, a B team, a C team, etc. And so now they're starting to realize they're kind of competing with each other, right? They're not just playing with each other; they're competing with each other for spots, for playing time. Now she's playing in what's called Nexus, which is kind of like, the futures program for USA field hockey. And that's an evaluation process. It's a development process, but it's also an evaluation process as they can begin to place you on regional teams and national teams, et cetera. And so I'm kind of predicting and hoping that it's not a negative experience, but I'm predicting one that where challenges are coming, right?
Yeah.
For her mentally on, whether, on like on that kind of just that recognition of her competing against her peers, not just against another team in another jersey, but the people that she that wears the same jersey with, right? So I'm trying to really kind of figure out, how to prepare her for that, where I can still be dad, not like some sort of mindset guru necessarily, right?
Yeah.
And I'm not a field hockey coach. I don't, I know enough about field hockey because I've been around it so long with my wife and my sister-in-law and now her, but I'm not here to coach her. And so like, what advice would you give someone like myself or someone like DJ who's got young kids that are like coming up? And even though we don't play, even though they're not in the MLS academy pipeline, they're maybe a different pipeline of soccer, basketball, et cetera, or field hockey, basketball, et cetera. Like, what kind of advice would you give a parent in helping like support that?
Yeah. There's, first and foremost, I would say to parents, make sure that your priorities for why you want your child to compete are aligned with their priorities for why they want to compete, because sometimes there's misalignment, and then that creates disconnect, that creates a child feeling misunderstood or not supported in the way that they would like to be from their parent. And that's huge. So I would, and we used to do this at IMG. We had like a list of priorities for why you want your child to compete. Is it because you want them to have fun? You want them to develop, to learn life skills and build character? Is it because you want them to get a scholarship or play competitively, and take it to the next level? Kind of have a list and write down, okay, this is my top one for her, top 2, 3, 4, 5, and then have her write her list as well. And then compare and kind of see what the differences are and ensure that you're trying to be on the same page with her. Because if she's competing for fun, but you're doing it because you want her to try and get a college scholarship and play at the next level, then she's going to think about challenges differently than you're going to think about challenges.
Right.
And you need to be there for her. So that to me is kind of my main one that I see creating disconnect in the future if you're not aligned.
Yeah.
That would be my.
I like that exercise, and that's something that I think any of us can kind of do and think about, because it's kind of like that review you do like in business, like that 360 where I'm a manager of 10 people. I kind of review them in these areas, they review themselves, and then or vice versa, and we kind of see if our perspectives are aligned or not on where we're at from an attitude aptitude perspective or whatever it might be. So I definitely see that as valuable. I just think that it's a little bit of a scary place to be, especially as this is my oldest. So even as a parent, you go through these experiences for the first time, and this particular daughter has really big dreams and largely a relatively a high level of confidence, maybe sometimes even like blindly confident. She's like she thinks she's the shit, right? But she's going to she's young for that age group, right? And she's like you, Elle, she's young for her class. She started early. I think that she's behind the 8 ball in some areas, like socially, because she's young and the oldest of her sisters. So she's like a very youthful 12 and a half year old, right? And so anyway, so it's just like it almost feels like the pressure is kind of beginning to just dial up a little bit, and so I'm curious to see how she handles that.
And you're trying to at that age, because like I mentioned, they're starting to become more aware of their peers. They're getting compared more often in terms of selection for teams or who's starting, like you mentioned. So they're paying a lot more attention to what other people are doing and comparing themselves to that. And so you really want to pay attention to intrinsic versus extrinsic motivation. And intrinsic would be, I've got a personal reason for why I'm competing that motivates me to get up every day, and I can find purpose in that. Extrinsic is you're doing it more for an accolade, an outcome, an external reward or recognition. And when you become more socially aware of your peers and the people around you, you start to feed into that external motivation a little bit more. And what's going to help you grow and develop and stay on track is being intrinsically motivated. We talk about that with first team players still, where, the ones that are extrinsically motivated struggle sometimes when they don't get what they want, they didn't start, they're going through an injury or a rough period because they've got less purpose. They've got less of a reason within themselves.
Mm-hmm.
So then how do we fuel that as parents? It's really that like process versus outcome. It's setting personal goals and comparing yourself to who you were yesterday and recognizing those small wins. It's being able to take adversity and use it as opportunity and have conversations around that and be inspired by other people instead of threatened by other people.
Yeah. I mean, I when you were talking about, when we asked the question around confidence, you were talking about the comparing aspect of it. And, I think about like, what Harry just said, the advice that you gave, and then also in the context of the kids. I mean, this is, in a lot of cases in suburban America, this is their adversity story, right? The ups and downs of sports, how they navigate through it, the social aspects of it. And so I think part of, as parents, and I was talking to both Travis and Josh about this with my kids, is like, let them feel some of this stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Let them sit in it for a little bit instead of trying to save them in every single situation. And that's tough as a parent to do that.
Mm-hmm.
But also I think it's what will help kind of mold and develop them, both short and long term. So yeah, I just want to share that
I think one thing that's hard for parents, with that, because I totally subscribe to that, right? Like letting our kids like face the adversity and like feel it. I think one of the challenges is that the parents are the ones struggling with it.
Oh, heck yeah.
Like,
Heck
so
yeah.
like if they're not letting their kids sit in it because they can't handle whatever the scenario is, right? Like,
1000%.
and so like they don't even give their kids an opportunity to sit in that adversity or whatever the challenge,
Right.
because like they are feeling it internally. Maybe they're trying to live vicariously through their kid, or they're comparing somebody else's kid and what they're doing and what they're spending money and what camp they're going to, or whatever. And so it never gets past them, it never, to let the kid experience it.
That's right.
Oh yeah, Harry. So I want to know, how do you manage those moments? Harry and DJ both.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, for me, I think that like I'm trying to prepare my own mind for it, because so far it's been very smooth sailing for Gracie.
Yeah.
She's made every team. She's a starter. She typically leads the team in goals, tournament after tournament, or is up there with that. She's more of an offensive player. She's a mid or forward, depending on the team and the 7v7 versus 11v11.
Mm-hmm.
And so, but I think that she may sail through this U14 timeframe just because of where she's at from a skill perspective. But as she gets into high school and she starts thinking about some of these big dreams she has, as far as where she's already talking about where she wants to go in college and all these different. I mean, she's 12, right? So she has, but as like experience changes, as as the competitive landscape shifts, as her body continues to develop physically,
Mm-hmm.
as her peers develop physically, there may be, changes in the wind on like where she stands, and maybe not. And so we haven't had to face it a ton. I think I've shared this before in some other episodes about, from my perspective as a father, trying to kind of really be prescriptive on like how, how I'm, like what I'm communicating to her, like pre and post game, and I've shared this before for those that have heard this, but like, I found myself always, telling her I'm proud of her, because I believe, I wanted to let her know I was proud of her, right? When she performed well, for example, right? And of course, when she wouldn't as well, they didn't win, proud of her. But like, I've tried to shift that language to like, hey, when I say I'm proud of her, I'm really direct. Like I call her out. I call that being proud based on like behaviors that I've seen, right?
Mm-hmm.
The process, behaviors, like doing the extra work, or taking something she's been practicing and applying it on the field, right? And then when she does well or performs well or scores or whatever it is, it's I'm happy for you, right? So that way, like, her identity isn't in like being successful or like winning or the result, but more about more attached to the process, So that way, as she has blocks in the road and challenges that she faces, she carries that identity more towards the process rather than the outcome, But it's a constant work,
No
we talk about that here with our coaches, because when we're not the first team, like when we're working with the academy, I mean, they have a 1 to 3% likelihood of quote unquote making it.
Right.
So maybe 2 or 3 of our academy players are going to be ones who make it to the highest level, maybe go to Europe, maybe they're in the MLS for a while. So are we spending all of our time just trying to get them to be these top level players, or are we thinking about how we're developing them as people? And part of it is, and that's exactly what we talk about, the example that you gave, instead of saying, oh, great finish, great goal, it's, do you know what, your composure under pressure there, you handle that moment really well, and that's from all the repetition you did. You're acknowledging like mental skills, you're acknowledging psychological traits and characteristics, things that are always in their control, and things that they can continue to work on that are going to be transferable in any area of life, so that they build confidence in not just their ability to be a soccer player, but their ability to be a good student, their ability to be a good sibling and a good son or daughter, like all of that, because the likelihood of them making it is so slim to none, and we have to be realistic about that.
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah,
I love that. I think that's another reason why I'm a big subscriber to like multiple sports, or certainly multiple things, extracurricular things, right? Because my sister was a basketball player from head to toe, from 4 to 24, right? And then when that ended, that was it. And who am I now, right? And so whether it be multiple sports or getting into your dad forcing you to be in the musical, things like that, to just kind of get them exposed to other things, because for every athlete there comes a time where Father Time knocks at the door and is like, hey, this is it, like, you're done, and then you probably have most of your life to live after that, right? And so anyway, this is like this. I think this podcast and these episodes oftentimes turn into like two dads trying to ask questions about how to
trying to be better dads right here, better husbands. Thank you for helping us.
Yeah, exactly.
Me as well.
One thing I wanted to share too is, like, we talk about some of the macro kind of adversities, whether it's trying to be good at a sport overall or whatever it is, or school. Jess and I, my wife, were just talking about this last night. It's like, how do we let our kids, even some of the real small micro kind of adversities, or just things that make them really uncomfortable, that even shouldn't be a big deal, but how do we let them do that? Like, for instance, my wife and I were talking about, how does one of our kids get back and forth to a practice, and it really wasn't that far, but we were like breaking our necks trying to figure out, how do we drive? How do we rearrange our schedule? And it's just like, well, why don't we let them walk? Or why don't we let them figure out how to get there and have to ask somebody, one of their friends? And that's a really small thing, but I know for the kid I'm talking about, my daughter, it's uncomfortable for her, and that's going to help her grow. So letting these kind of micro adversities, even if they seem really small, leaning into those. I have seen that has been, I remember my oldest, she couldn't even go up to a concession stand and ask for her own food at whatever age it was, and it was like, no, you're going to go do that. And then she'd do it, and she'd gain confidence. And now, that 17-year-old is up giving presentations, volunteering, doing all these different things. But it started at a really young age, trying to expose her to that. So
this is a PSA for everybody listening. DJ makes his kids walk in the snow in Cleveland to practice. He's a mean dad. He's mean.
Oh, they'll tell you I'm mean, man. They'll tell you, what?
So mean.
Yes, I mean, there's all these, all these folks in these streets, right? That could take them and grab them, right? That's right.
Listen, you don't know how it was when we were raised. We had to walk in the snow uphill both ways.
Exactly. Thank you.
Barefoot. Yeah, I love it. Well, Elle, thank you so much for joining us today. Hopefully, we'll bring you on for another, like, a round 2, and we'll keep up with the Columbus crew, and hopefully DJ can get out there on Saturday and see some folks on the pitch, as they say.
Oh, okay. See, I got
Don't worry, DJ. We'll catch you up. We'll get
you. Thank you. I appreciate that.
We're grateful for you, and
really appreciate
just
you.
excited to see all the great work you're doing, not only with the Columbus crew, but what you do in the future. But for those listening, remember, you don't have to be sick to get better.